Yes. And was there ever a point in your training or your general aviation time that you had an in-flight emergency that really shook you a little bit?
Definitely. Yeah, I have one. I've had a few, I should say. We'll start off just with the first one here, and it was at Capitol Drive Airport in a Cherokee 140. I was a private pilot. I had 75 hours at the time, and this was in that time frame. I had the private pilot. I was building that time for the instrument, and so I was going to do a solo cross country flight at night from Capitol Drive to Madison and back. And I remember before I took this flight, the whole purpose of my flight was to have clear and effective communication, perfect navigation. I was using VORs. I was going into a Class Charlie airport, so just dealing with ATC, everything was supposed to go perfectly. that was the plan for this flight. It was solo at night. It was a summer night, and so I'm in the airplane. I get to the end of the runway. It's at night, untowered airport. I do my run-ups, and everything goes well. Run-up only takes 30 seconds or so in a little Cherokee. And I advance throttle and I go down the runway. I believe it's 60 knots. You rotate. I pulled back. I climbed maybe 50 feet and the engine cut out. And my heart sank, or my stomach sank, whatever. I was scared. What do you do? I did what I was trained. I reduced throttle. I pitched down. I'm probably 75 feet above the runway now, 3/4 of the way down the runway. You just took off, right? Pitched down, the landing light illuminated the trees at the end of the runway. And you've always heard, if you don't like what you see, when that landing light illuminates, shut it off, right? But I didn't shut it off, right? So yeah, so I reduced throttle, I pitched down, and I was going to crash. I was going to crash into the trees at the end of the runway. I didn't have the room to land. If I were just to push it down, I'd gain airspeed. I wouldn't be able to stop. If anything, I would porpoise, and I was going to crash. And so instinctively, I added throttle because it was still windmilling. The prop was still moving. I added throttle. I pitched down. I saw the end of the runway. Saw the trees. I added throttle. It came back to life. As soon as it came back to life, I pitched up, cleared the trees, and I did a flow. I did an emergency flow, mixture rich, fuel pumps on, switch gas tanks. There's not much else you can do in a very simple single like that. That's about it. Carb heat, I think, was one of them. But I did this flow, and I cleared the trees, and 30 seconds later, it died again. So now I cleared the trees. There's a road to my left, Capitol Drive, is a 2-lane, kind of like a small highway. And I said, okay, I'm going to put it down on the highway. So I pulled the throttle. I already did my flow. Nothing else changed. And I was getting set up to land on the highway. I was making a left turn. So I pulled throttle. I was getting set up, and I didn't even think about it, but it worked before. So I added throttle again after, I don't know, maybe 5 seconds or so. It came back to life. So I climbed up. I said, okay, great. I got, maybe 10, 15 seconds of full throttle. I'm going to turn around and land the way that I just took off. I started making my turn, and nice and shallow because I was low, right? And I know you're supposed to land straight ahead, but I had power. I was climbing. I was in a climbing turn back towards the runway. And I turn, and it's just a black hole. The lights shut off at the airport. So now I have to bring up the lights, and 5 seconds later the engine dies again. And so now I bring up the lights as I'm in the best glide. Now after I bring up the lights, I realize I'm already halfway. I'm right in the middle of the airport, maybe 150 feet high. There's no way I can make a landing from here. But you know what? This is working for me. I can climb for maybe 10 seconds, and then I pull the throttle for 5 seconds and it died, and so I did this. I did this, went up and down, up and down. I finally made it to a left downwind and just pulled the throttle, executed a power off 180 and landed. So it died on me a few more times throughout this experience or throughout this time. And I landed and I brought it back. And the thing would still idle on the ground. It would idle and it would have, if I added gas, it would go for a little bit. So I'm pretty shook up. I make it back to the ramp. I park the airplane. I pull the mixture. The airplane shuts off. Master's still on. And I hear splashing on the ground. There's a little window on your left with a Cherokee. And I hear splashing on the ground. And I immediately knew what it was. I hopped out of the airplane. The last place the fuel goes in a Cherokee 140 is at the bottom of the engine. There's a strainer down there where you strain on your pre-flight. This particular design had a T, and if you pushed in and turned, it would lock open. Oh. And that's how you drain some fuel to check if there's any contaminants. And so things started to make sense to me as I was putting this all together. We'll go all the way back to my pre-flight inspection for that night. I'm walking around the pre-flight. It's night. I have a headlamp on. I'm trying to do everything perfectly, right? But I missed a couple steps. One of the first steps was to make sure that the fuel was in left or right, not in the off position. It's either left, right, or off. It was in the off position. I didn't verify it was in the off position. It should have been in left or right. So during my pre-flight, when I walked around, the fuel selector was in the off position. So when I went to drain fuel from the lowest point or the last place the fuel goes before the engine, it got stuck in the on position. I only got a few driblets. I said, okay, it looks good. And I continued. After, when trying to start the airplane, I realized it wouldn't start. I'm cranking. I was like, well, what's going on? I look, oh, sure enough, fuel. And so that was a checklist error. So there's a lot of things I learned here during this time or this flight. And so I learned, okay, so I put it into left, let's say, and the airplane started up, no problem. Taxi down the runway. But what was happening, I had the electric fuel pump on, or idle. I had enough fuel at idle because it was still draining this whole time. I'm spitting fuel out of the bottom of the engine. Mm-hmm. When I started up the airplane, I brought up the lights because I couldn't see. I brought up the lights as soon as I started the airplane at the airport. I never turned them off or return them back on before takeoff, so that's why they shut off, because I think it's a 10-15 minute timer, Yeah. So I learned a lot. Yeah. And so anyways, what was happening was I was just the gas was just leaking from the bottom of the engine there out of that fuel drain. And the carb would burn the fuel that was in it, and then it would die. When I would pull the throttle to idle, the carburetor would refill back up with the engine-driven fuel pump and the electric fuel pump. It would fill back up, and then I would burn it off when I had it full power. Yeah. So that was at 75 hours, and that shook me up a little bit for a few days. I was kind of scared, but then I came back, I think that weekend. I said, okay, I got to get over this, and I went flying again. It was no problem. But that was my first real emergency in GA. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, a few things that I learned.
Fantastic.
I'm just gonna. Yeah. So a few things that I learned there were, just to, I guess, checklist usage, proper checklist usage, and the whole purpose of this flight was everything was supposed to go perfectly, and I think I was doing things right, but probably just rushing through this checklist. There's a checklist for a reason. Do verify, or trust and verify, right? When you read something or when you're doing a flow, I've caught myself, I've got comfortable in the jet that I'm flying in now. So I'll do something. I'll realize I'll say it, but I actually didn't look at it. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I got to make sure this is here, that's there, So just proper checklist usage was one big thing that I learned that night. Resetting the lights before you take off, in case you need to return, so they don't shut off on you. And I guess I had really good training because it was just instinctively what I did. Instead of trying to pull up with the and just stalling out, just pushing down and doing that flow, fuel pumps mixture, whatever that fuel selector, training kicked in, and I was able to land and bring the airplane back in one piece.
Yeah, that's an amazing, amazing story. And I think a lot of it to do with your mechanical ability and understanding the system had a lot to do with it. You figured it out. You used critical thinking and your knowledge to figure out, well, this works. Let's keep going. I mean, the fact that you were able to make it work and come back. Now, the fuel, as you explained it, was draining, and therefore, when the demand exceeded its ability, it would go to idle. It would run. It would have fuel starvation, and that checklist usage and ensuring that you're not going too fast when you're reading a checklist. And you said trust but verify. We see this every single day. How many times have you walked up to an airplane, the crew's gone, but the beacon light is still on, and you're thinking, "Oh, why is the beacon light on?" That's why 99.9% of the time it's because you've gone through your parking checklist or secure checklist, whatever your airline calls it, and you read it, and the or as a first officer, you're reading it, and the captain says the response. Yeah. And you're reading it while you're doing other things and packing up your bag and your EFB and your headset and stuff. It's like, slow down.
Yeah.
Take the checklist out. Read it. Don't read it like you're a Micro Machines guy from that commercial from the 80s. It's like parking brake on. You make your eyes, as the person reading the checklist, make your eyes go to, in the case of the Airbus, the triple indicator. All right, is there pressure? Is it okay? And the next thing, beacon off. Have your eyes go up. Take a look. Your captain might look at you like, what are you, stupid or something? What's taking so long? But there's a reason. Now, obviously, it doesn't go that slow. It kind of goes faster, but don't just arbitrarily read it. And I find myself very guilty of this. We all do, especially late at night after the third leg of the day or fourth leg of the day, and you're tired and it's dark and you just want to, you're done. The airplane is connected to the jet bridge. The engines are shut down, and all you got to do is read a checklist. And you know it by heart, although you're not supposed to do it by heart. So, park brake, all this stuff, and you're going through it. Slow down. Verify. It may seem like something insignificant when you're reading a parking checklist. The brake is set, the engines are shut off. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You leave a beacon light on, big deal. But it's through that process of, I do this consistently with everything, and every time I read a checklist, and I'm never going to go faster than what is reasonable, then when you're really time crunched and you've got an engine failure at 450 feet off the deck at night and you don't like what you see, you're still going to go back and go, oh, memory item. It's a checklist that you've memorized. What is it? Step by step. And in your situation, it probably saved your life.
Yeah. Yeah. If it would have, if it would have been an accident, it would have been down to pilot error. That's how they would have classified it, because they would have found that valve or that little thing open there, and it would have been pilot error. It wasn't the airplane's fault; it was the pilot's fault. That was my pre-flight. So just going too quickly, being too excited. Maybe being in a time crunch. Led to that scenario, and slowing down and verifying everything's done appropriately would have prevented it.
Absolutely.
And you'll probably never make that mistake again.
You're 100% correct. Trust me. I told everybody about this. Who was
exactly. We all do. Yeah, we all make those mistakes, and we share it with everybody we know that's an aviator, because they will probably learn from your mistakes. What do they say? A good pilot learns from his mistakes, and a great pilot learns from other people's mistakes. Well, that's how we all become good and great pilots.
Yeah, don't keep it a secret. If you learn something, you did something, everybody, we're human. We all do bonehead things. We all make errors. But hey, I made this error. You tell your coworkers and your friends about it, like they'll learn not to make that error. They go, oh crap, listen, what happened to Tony? You know, did you hear what happened to Tony?
Yeah. And I think for me, you know, if I make an error like that, or, you know, any kind of an error, you know, and sharing it with somebody else is almost a way of me like not creating a bad habit. You know what I mean? Because if it happened, it's probably some kind of bad habit that I have developed, you know, somewhere along the way. And, you know, if I talk it out and say, hey, I'm never going to do that again, you know, and then you share that with your buddy. And then, you know, if you happen to come close to doing it again, they're like, hey, I thought you said you were going to do that again. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Thank God we talked about it, you know? So that's for me, that's how it works.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So